Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mind Over Masculinity podcast. Today we are going straight into the deep end. Well, we're living in a weird moment in history. The news cycle feels like a doom scroll. Climate, tech, politics, mental health, everything is stacked on top of everything. It's not just one crisis, listeners. It's a stack of crises sitting on the same nervous system. That bigger tangle is what some people call the meta crisis. And now layer that with being a man in this era. You are told to provide, lead, perform, be sensitive, but not too sensitive or soft. Be strong, but not rigid. Be spiritual, but still, you got to hit those KPIs. No wonder so many high performers still feel like they hit an invisible wall. And listeners, my guest today knows that wall very well. He spent 19 years as a counterintelligence specialist, literally trained to see patterns other people miss, to navigate complexity when there is no map. Then he moved into executive and personal development coaching, and for almost 30 years, he has been in rooms with Fortune 500 leaders and top performers who did everything right, climbed the ladder, hit the goals, and still they felt stuck. And out of that work, he created something called the pivot methodology, blending hardcore pattern recognition with consciousness work, meditation, expanded states. He has seen that the old leadership playbook do not work in a meta crisis, and that men who only live from the neck up, logic, strategy, eventually crash. So today, listeners, we are going to talk about navigating meta crisis, men's work in a world that feels like it is on fire, and what it really takes to lead in complexity without burning yourself or numbing out. So if you're a man listening or someone who loves men, this episode is for you. So listeners, we have my incredible guest, Dave Schoof. So Dave, welcome to the show, and it's really, really an honor to have you here with us.
Oh, thank you. It's really good to be here. It's a real pleasure.
Okay, Dave, I want to start getting super clear on language. You
Sure.
talk about the meta crisis, not just a crisis. Now,
Mm,
for a man listening to this conversation, let's say in his car between meetings, what
yeah.
does that actually mean in real life, not in theory?
Yes. Well, you did a beautiful job, I thought, of bringing it in. And that is, at the higher level, just in the background of all of our lives, we're in unprecedented times. There are layers of this collision, like you were speaking of,
Mm.
um, whether it's the environment, whether it's polarization in politics and society, organizations. And some people get caught up in that, like you said, doom scrolling and think that's all there is, but there's actually much more going on. So that's at the top layer. Then at another layer in our lives, we're navigating unprecedented change in terms of speed. You bring in AI, you bring in uh, the fast movement of
Mhm.
globalization. So this is new territory that we're in. And I think it's important to look underneath the headlines. We're seeing leadership models that are obsolete. Uh, the way we navigate, the maps that we were using are no longer useful. And drill that down even further. What does it mean to be a man today? I love the polarities that you presented, the need to be sensitive and yet decisive, the humility that comes with being open-minded and yet not losing ground. Um, so, so when I speak of the meta crisis, I'm talking about this new layer of complexity that we're finding ourselves in.
Hmm. That makes a lot of sense here. One question that instantly, it came into my mind, Dave, is this a generational thing?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, I think if we kept it at one level, like just what's going on, it would be very easy to say it's in a narrow window of time and specifically around a generation. I think it's been coming along for quite a while. Uh,
Mm.
I think we're at that cusp of it. So, I'm older, I'm a boomer, but say 3 generations, 4 generations moving into the workplace are being exposed to, a completely new landscape.
Mm.
So, when I was growing up, I had a clear path for my life. You go to university, you get
Yeah.
married, you get a career, and you sign this almost social contract with an organization that you would work with for, 30 years and be
Mm.
taken care of and then retire, at least in the West. And that social contract's gone, and, we've had key moments like the pandemic or the financial crisis in 2008 that were they were pivot points in themselves. And,
Mm.
but they're not a standalone. And I think, anyone that thinks that we're going back to a condition, an environment, a life that was before that, is probably not accurate.
Mm. It really it is for the fact in there. Um and Dave, especially for I think there's a lot of right now, this debate uh,
Mm,
around exactly what kind of I gave a glimpse in the intro that uh, a man should be like this.
mm.
What are the green flags here? This is the ideal masculinity that we're looking for. Like everybody has got their own definition of it.
That's right.
And
Yes.
and sometimes, I mean, it is real because you gotta feel like if I'm not living up to those expectations or definitions, then I'm completely isolated. Like,
Yep.
what kind of group or community, after all, obviously, we are social people and we always typically look for people who are like-minded and with whom we connect. But then there's this such a huge dilemma within, especially for men as well, because there's so many definitions and groups and opinions out there. So
Yes.
how do you define, how do you see masculinity? From which POV?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the richness of that is huge. And when we can talk about, maleness. What does it mean to be a man? Then masculine has energetic qualities. So, a female leader will have masculine qualities of agency, right? So
Mm.
that adds a layer of complexity, doesn't it? But I think what I sense behind your question is this confusion, and we grew up getting messages that we were not to be like our fathers. That was clear, especially in our treatment of women. And so
Mm.
it's been a sensitivity that's come in. And sometimes whenever there's a change, I'm an expert in human development, and whenever there's a change, often there's a period of disintegration or wobbliness before something new emerges,
Yeah.
or a pendulation from one extreme to the other, much like what you were describing. So I think, in our long overdue sensitivity to how to be open and humble
Mm.
and sensitive and not just closed and full of agency, we had a tendency to go overboard and we lost our courage. We lost our groundedness. So, there's been a lot of men's work out there and it's
Mm.
very good. I want to acknowledge the hard work and, I appreciate the pioneers in the development of that. I think there's a call for a new kind of men's work, especially in these days where there is such uncertainty and movement. So, how do I bring in not just my rational mind, but my imaginal mind, my sensitivity, my creativity, my uniqueness, so that I'm not just trying to duplicate some sort of model out there or be like others. So there's this interesting, almost paradoxical blend of individuality, and yet I'm a social being. I need to be connected, like you said, with like-minded folks, find a tribe that I can relax into. So, this is why I think it's not an easy answer. And the solution moves into not just relying on our logical, hard-driven, rational mind.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's really a very challenging question, and that too within 30 minutes, I think it's very difficult to define.
Yeah, 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 true.
Um, and when we connect with this, the old leadership playbooks, mostly when we imagine leadership, we typically talk about stuff like ego driven performance or
Yeah.
control, aggression, this kind of, like a heroic individualism.
Mm.
Yeah, I think in some sense it is absolutely needed, because as a leader, people are absolutely looking up to you. And I think there are situations where we actually need definitely some kind of strong will and strong head, strong head.
Yes.
However, because you have watched leaders who mastered every book here on leadership and framework, still, still crashing into the wall. From your lens, what specifically about the old leadership playbook fails in this environment?
Yes. I think what we're finding over and over again, and you can think about your own experience when you followed someone, when you trusted someone. It wasn't that they were perfect. It wasn't that they even knew all the answers. In fact, when I hear someone that's in a leadership role pretend to have all the answers, my warning bell goes off because especially today, it's impossible to know all the answers. So there's a humility. So I think what's coming online, and this is why I call it the pivot, is not ignoring, like you said, the need for um, direction and create followership and create structure, but it needs to be complemented with something else. And that is going inside, going into what are my values? What's important to me? How do I show up and model that I'm taking care of myself, for example? I have resilience. I can navigate. It's not that I never make mistakes, but I can demonstrate how I recover from mistakes. How do I listen better? How do I increase sensitivity to reading the room or reading my team, what's not being said? So that requires me to slow down, become more conscious. So, what I love is the wisdom traditions have always been pointing to this, whether it's Buddhism, Taoism, Hinduism, there's a wisdom of integration. And what's really fun is to watch science catch up with those wisdom traditions. And now we know that, from our brain wiring, we need both the rational and the imaginal, for example, or the relational.
Yeah. I mean, we do talk about the masculine and the feminine energy. Like, even a woman can, I mean, every one of us is having this beautiful amalgamation of both these energies within us.
Mhm. Yes. Yes. And they feed each other, right? Like, I always see the symbol of the caduceus, the intertwining braid,
Yep. Yep.
where, we need both. And, a lot of my work with whether it's senior leaders or working with men in groups, the balance is off. So it's not that we're having to create something that didn't exist before. It's quite frankly, it's mostly about remembering and reclaiming what
Mm.
already is in us, but that's become blocked or forgotten because of the culture we're in, the way we grew up, our belief systems, our mindsets, etc.
Mhm. Makes sense. Makes sense. Then, Dave, I mean, because your background, your expertise, you have this, wild combo, counterintelligence, pattern recognition, and then corporate leadership. So before we head on to understand specifically in our men's world, so for meta crisis, let's say um, someone who, would uh, realize that, okay, yes, I am in that crisis and I'm just tired and nothing is working out.
Mhm.
What are the first signals that he's actually in something much bigger than just a bad quarter? Are there
That's a
any
great
patterns?
yes.
Mhm.
It's spot on. It usually comes, and this is when I'm seeing them, they're coming to me, right? Because they're
Oh,
puzzled. Like, the 2 things are happening. One is they've been trying the same old things to fix it, and it doesn't work anymore.
mm,
It's like when you take I live in Switzerland, but I'm an American by birth, and we have a reputation for when we travel around the world expecting everyone to speak English. And when
yeah.
they don't, we just say it louder, right? So
Well,
we're doing something over and over again, and we're not getting any traction. So that's the first point. And then the second is this mysterious unease. I call it the disquiet, where often it comes in the middle of the night where someone is puzzled why they don't feel comfortable with themselves. They've got the success trappings, the external signs of success. They're doing okay in their work,
mm,
but they're uneasy, and what that is really a search for meaning. It's a real wake up call. TV shows will make fun of it and call it a midlife
that's
crisis.
yep.
Yeah, exactly, but there's something to it, and it is a midlife crisis, but it's a serious existential wake up, and what I'm noticing is because of the times that we're in, this is coming earlier. This was something that usually hit a mid-level manager, late
Mm,
40s, early 50s, maybe beyond that a little bit, and I'm seeing clients in their mid-30s.
mhm,
So it's coming in earlier, and I think it's exacerbated by the traditional ways that men have been culturalized to move through life, and that is their work is their identity. And so anything that is no longer working at work, I can't find my magic. I can't find my ability to create direction in my teams. All of a
mm,
sudden, that's threatening my own identity as a man. So it becomes very, very personal, very, very quickly. So that's usually, the signals that something is much bigger going on.
mm. No, that's actually very well put, Tavian, because I also do believe there's a huge shift that is going on right now. I mean, I'm seeing people in their in fact, in mid 20s and early 30s talking about, how they are, kind of wishing to embark upon a journey that explores their purpose. What is the point of
Mhm.
life
Yes.
and why am I here? What I'm doing? um, Discussions around accountability, authenticity, although it has been like taken to a level of that it becomes like a buzzword. But then there are people, men, women who are actually from the inside out, so much ready to work upon themselves, do this inner work because they realize that, this is uh, absolutely needed if they also want to become a leader, if they also want to become a contributor. Uh, and I think we do not we do not address it anymore as a midlife crisis.
Mhm. I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a big change that's going on. When I started coaching, to be
Uh-huh.
perfectly honest, I felt that I had a responsibility for my client, whether it's a leader, whether it's just, anyone I was working with, that I was responsible for their satisfaction, happiness, development,
Mm,
solving their problems. And it was kind of arrogant, to be honest with you. And it also represented a mindset that there's something wrong, that there needs to be fixed or healed. And as I've gotten older and more mature, I've come to realize that's the wrong mindset around, personal development or inside work, as you're mentioning. It's really more about remembering, like we're really already fantastic. I often think of the Michelangelo quote that was attributed to when he created the statue David. And he
mm,
said the statue of David was already in that marble, and his job was just to chip away the extraneous marble. And that's how I view now unfolding human development. And my role as a coach is really helping chip away some of those pieces that are blocking effectiveness, or the fact that we no longer remember our inherent genius, the spirit that's in us and how to tap into that.
Mm, mm. No, I really appreciate that reflection, Dave, because to be honest, it's very rare, because especially when we talk about personal development or maybe the wellness industry or this,
Mm,
uh, all the conversations around this inner work. I think they're very genuine and very rare. There's genuine, authentic discussion, because often, um, people would think that, um my helplessness and the position I'm in, it might be someone else's way to
mm,
glory and fame, and that
mm.
shouldn't be, not at all.
That's right. That's right. And even looking at our strategies, that are now maybe blocking us or causing us suffering, to look at them not as something wrong, but at some point in our lives, usually in our childhood, they really helped us. So if I'm shy, if I'm not speaking up, or like you spoke of my abilities with situational awareness, my ability to blend in and see what's not seen, not being spoken of, that was a strategy that helped me navigate my family, moving around, being a stranger in cities. So now it could get in the way where if I'm not speaking up enough or if I'm not feeling confident in myself, but not to look at those things as something wrong, but just, strategies that we had,
Mhm.
protective parts in us that were really doing a very, very good job. They just may need some updating.
I really love the word situational awareness. This is something
Mm,
uh, I was in a conversation with a person from Air Force, and he was talking about that and how in one of the cricket matches we were watching, and he was telling that how important it is it to have situational awareness, because in split second you may have to completely pivot to a entire different
mm,
strategy
that's
because
right.
you never know the game. Like how
That's right. That's right. What is a guarantee is it's going to change. These days it'll be fast.
yeah, yeah. Um, Dave, there's this men's work that feels like a real nervous system and shadow work. And
Mm,
then there's men's work that is basically, okay, let me, you know, put my everything for the entire week, and then the weekend a retreat, some nice photos, and that's it. From your perspective, what is actually essential for men doing real inner work in the middle of a meta crisis?
mm. Yeah, I think, first of all, not doing it alone. I think somehow we've gotten the idea, especially in the past few generations,
Mm,
that self-development or even spiritual work um, has to be alone. Like it's like you're climbing a mountain and you have to conquer that mountain. The
mm,
hero's journey by Joseph Campbell was built on individual heroics. And that's important, but it's not enough. We need each other. We need to be in relational space. This is another kind of intelligence, is relational
really
intelligence.
simple,
You
yes.
know, you and I are speaking, you're in India, I'm in Switzerland. We
Mm,
don't even see each other at the moment. And yet
yeah.
I have a sense of certainly what's going on in me as I listen to you. My nervous system's reacting. I have
Mm,
a feeling of connection with you and tempo and pace. And then even between us, even though we're on Zoom, there's a field between us and I can sense into that. That
mm,
takes practice. That takes being in, small groups, working with people. And you sharing your stories and your challenges and me sharing mine. What will happen eventually is we'll create an intimacy where we discover not only how we're different and unique and celebrate that, but also
mm,
how our experiences have been similar and we're not alone. So I think, especially with men, because men tend not to be as so I'm broad brushing here, but in general, they're not as relational and socially depth and leaning as women in most cultures. Not
Mm,
all, but most. And what's interesting in olden times, if we go back to our different cultures in the native times of indigenous people, it was very tribal, right? And men did
mm,
gather. So
yeah,
coming back and being together is one of the most important parts, not being alone in this. And then doing your work, uh, you know, shadow work. This is simply doing work with the unclaimed parts of ourselves that we banish.
mm,
Uh,
mm,
doing work around, um, often doing this work has a healing component. I don't think that you need to make healing the point of it. I think it's a side effect of really coming home to yourself, and as
mm.
a man, as a human, and connecting with other men and humans. We're also very competitive, and when you throw men into the room at first, we're a little competitive with each other, and it takes time to settle down.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I do agree. Ah, and when we juxtapose this into the world of corporate, a lot of guys, once again, there's this kind of, uh, thinking that, okay, I have a board meeting. I do not have
Mm.
time to maybe think about all the spiritual stuff or float off to the cosmos and work on
Yeah.
no time out there for me.
Yep.
How do you explain this part of your work to, let's say, a
Yeah.
nosed executive who
Sure.
only cares about results? Yeah.
And I need to respect their ecosystems, right? And
Yep.
and I adapt to them. I actually accompany them instead of expecting them to completely turn their calendar upside down to meet with me. So
Mm,
there's ways to, when I'm working with an individual or a leadership team, um, I'm using their day-to-day experiences, those board meetings, those town halls, those strategy meetings, those Excel spreadsheets. I'm using that as the laboratory. So if we're trying to expand a leader's ability to build trust in a team or to
mm,
listen better or to have greater gravitas, we're using real situations and then they're reporting back to me what's working, what's not. I give them experiments to try. And it's a gradient, they're building, it's almost like building a new skill or playing a new
mm,
instrument. So there's a
yeah.
period of incompetence and it's bumpy, but with some experimenting and fine tuning, we start getting victories. Um, Most people are pretty
Mm.
good at watching themselves in action. Every once in a while, someone's a little rusty on that and needs to learn a little bit on how to do self observation. But once that's there, we're off and running. And there's an excitement and a momentum that then can build. So, what I would say is you don't have to stop your life, and you don't have to turn into something you're not. That's the other fear that's very common. Like,
Yep.
I'll give up my winning strategies. This is what got me here. It's like not at all. It's like how do we leverage them and expand your repertoire? I don't need to teach most of my leaders how to be more rational, how to be more cognitive. They already have that.
Mm.
It's building the emotional intelligence, the relational intelligence, the somatic intelligence, trusting your gut, reading a room, sensing what's going on between people. Those are the antennas that we're building sensitivity. And we can do that almost real time.
I really love that, this is not a complete one step overhaul. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's not that, you're not asking them to become mistakes, but you are asking them to become more accurate at reading reality with a wider lens and a calmer body. So there's this, you know,
Spot on.
beautiful interplay of all the systems within us.
That's right. That's why I call it a pivot. It's not a 180, it's a 45-degree shift where you've discovered best practices aren't going to work anymore. So you need to bring in new things. But the only way you can do that is to make space. So we want to bring along your wisdom and your experience, but we want to, also um, build a capacity for you to see what can emerge, what's new.
Mm.
Live with a question and not be so quick to answer it because new information could come in. That's the only way we're going to be able to navigate where we don't have maps that are viable anymore.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Dave, before we wrap up this really, really enriching conversation, I'm very sure our listeners, they'll be very eager to explore your pivot methodology in
Mm.
more details, and also they would like to share their thoughts. So,
Yeah.
what is the best medium to connect with you?
Sure. Probably the easiest. I'm on LinkedIn. That's usually an easy way in. And I also have a website that has both my newsletter and podcast. And that's my name. It's daveshoof.com, SCHOOF.com.
Super. Listeners, what I'm going to do for all of you is have all the links and details to reach out to Dave, explore his pivot methodology in more and more details. So just refer to the show notes along with this episode. And I also want to land this for all the guys, especially listening, who are thinking, okay, this all sounds deep, but what do I actually do next? So, number one, you are not broken because the old playbook stopped working. The game changed. The meta crisis is not just global, it is personal, and your body is smart enough to tell you we cannot do this like before. Two, white knuckling your way through complexity is not leadership, it is slow motion collapse. Real leadership in this era, it looks like pattern recognition, emotional honesty, relational honesty, nervous system capacity, and having the courage to admit, I do not know what to do yet, but I'm still willing to listen, learn, and pivot. And three, inner work is not separate from performance. It is the OS, the operating system that everything else runs on. And if that system is full of shame, denial, and untreated trauma, it does not matter how sharp your strategy is. So if you are the man who is successful on paper and secretly exhausted, this episode is not an attack on you. It is an invitation to stop doing it alone, to upgrade from old survival patterns to a new way of navigating complexity that does not cost you your health, your relationships, and your soul. So, Dave, thank you so, so much. This is such a beautiful, once again, amalgamation of intelligence world and the consciousness world into the same conversation. Thank you so much.
It was a real pleasure. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
And to all the listeners, if this resonated, pause before you rush to the next thing and ask yourself the questions we talked about today. So, until then, this is Mind Over Masculinity. And make sure you follow if you want more conversations like this. Share this episode with a friend who needs it and keep doing the brave work of showing up differently. This is your host, Sana, signing off. Thank you.